Abrams Action Network HQ with us. And if you want the numbers when it comes to gambling on college football, the NFL, whatever it is, Evan has got. I mean, I got lost in the NFL stuff last night, and one day we're going to have to get into that because it is the level that you go to is just like it's a little bit deeper than plus minus and these things. So really, really interesting work that you do. So one of the reasons we love having you on every week. But this is a week in college football where we've got the rankings coming next week. There's a lot of tension kind of going on in fan bases. And one big game we'll talk about right off the top that's going to affect a lot of it is Ohio State and Penn State. Drew Aller is a game-time decision. Game-time decision to me usually means you're not going to play. I mean, more often than not, so how does this affect that game? And James Franklin has had a really hard time making these games the ones that put Penn State over the top.
Yeah, so the line actually hasn't done too much considering the news of pretty much the top quarterback in the game. It's, I'm not a huge fan of the other side of this on the Buckeyes side, so I would say Aller's just as important across the board. But the line has been Ohio State minus 3.5, mostly from the start. As expected with the question mark on the Penn State quarterback, all the actions on Ohio State, the tickets, the money, everyone seems to be wanting to go that side, but the line's not really budging. And I think all week, as you alluded to, people are having the story of, all right, so Ryan Day, 2-6 straight up and against the spread versus top 5 teams. You're like, all right, great storyline. Well, what about the other side? Well, I think you know about the other side. Franklin is 1-15 straight up, 5-11 against the spread versus top 5 teams. They both are just in the poop in this one, and one of them has to win. So I think throwing some of that out the window is probably the way, especially without Penn State's quarterback potentially. But then you look at this. So like as a home underdog, Penn State's lost 6 consecutive games straight up with their last win, 2016 against Ohio State. And then you say, okay, well, what about top 10 teams? Ohio State, 6-14-1 against the spread in those games, covering just, 2 of their last 10. They're second worst in that span since 2018 behind just Michigan State. So both sides of the ball have question marks around big games, but someone's got to win. Now, the question mark around Penn State's quarterback kind of has me paused a tiny bit because I do like the Nittany Lions here. Their offensive line ranks top 20 in line yards and havoc allowed, indicating clear rushing yard lanes, pockets for passing. I think Penn State's the right side. I just wish I had a more concrete answer on not even if he's going to play, but his health, because that's all that matters. Like if you want to play him in the game, go all ahead. But I just don't think we know exactly what we're getting here. Then you look at Ohio State quickly. Offensive and defensive lines are outside the top 50 in line yards. So I think the Nittany Lions, even without Aller, should be able to push the ball on the ground. I kind of like them in this one, but it does give me a little bit of pause, man.
Yeah, again, there's just always like this little information. And Ryan Day, if you look at the record that he has just as a head coach, anybody would want him, but he has he and James Franklin, like you said, they have the same exact problem. Like you can beat everybody you're supposed to beat, but when it comes down to beating the one team that is a toss-up, they just don't do it.
Yeah, let's call for overtime here with multiple fourth quarter miscues by head coaches in terms of tendencies and clock management, and someone's got to win. Will probably be like I don't expect this to be a very well timed and coached game if it's tight in the second half, because both of them have shown issues in that area throughout. So it's very fun and very college football-y that we have this top 5 matchup and both of them facing each other. I can't wait.
Yeah. Ole Miss and Arkansas. Ole Miss is probably, I would say, of a fan base that has to be the most disappointed about how this season has gone. Yeah. It might be Ole Miss at the top of that list because they did so much to build that roster. And, that loss to Kentucky really took the wind out of their sails. They follow up, they lose to LSU in a game where the fourth quarter was just not very well coached all the way around, and things went against them. And here you have Arkansas, who is kind of playing with house money right now because Sam Pittman was getting fired. Nobody knew what the future was. Talon Green, still very raw, but so much fun and such a weapon in that offense that has changed things around. Sam Pittman likely off the hot seat, barring a collapse now. And Ole Miss is kind of searching for answers.
Yeah, I would say Arkansas doesn't have too much to lose here because I think most would assume a loss anyway. And from Kiffin's point of view, I mean, he's been great in this spot. He's 28-8 straight up, 19-16-1 as a head coach, as a road favorite since 2019. That is 14-2 straight up, 11-4-1 in that spot. So he's done well on the road. And just from like a talent point of view, Ole Miss is a much better team. And it says it with the numbers. So it was -8, went all the way down to 6.5. Now bounced back up to 7.5, which is it currently sits. And like most of these games, all the action's on the Rebels. I think everyone wants to put their dollars there just because the talent between the two teams and the expectation here. So the thing I look at historically, though, Ole Miss has struggled with the Hogs. They're 1-10 against the spread versus Arkansas since 2013, including just 8-12 straight up. And this number is crazy. 4-16 ATS in the last 20 matchups. So it hasn't been an easy one, even if when you look at, most of the time you might have the talent gap anyway, but this time you're laying 7.5. So what I would probably look at here is either a live play on Ole Miss to see if I can get it down under that 7, or I might look at just doing the first half with Ole Miss and then seeing how the game goes, either doubling down or kind of rolling back on Ole Miss in this one. Ole Miss is first in Havoc. Havoc refers to percentage of plays in which the defense records a tackle for loss, forced fumble, intercepted pass, or a broken pass. So Arkansas should have immense difficulty trying to move the ball against Ole Miss's defense, even without talking about the talent on Ole Miss's offense. This is just the way I have to look at it. I have to want to lay this with Ole Miss. Now, outside of the trip to Baton Rouge, Dart has committed just 4 turnover-worthy throws on the season. So, yes, one outlier, but I do have trust in that team, in that offense to be able to do what they have to do. I like Ole Miss here, but yeah, you're right. I mean, what I've seen so far, you've had roller coasters, you've had landmines, you've had all sorts of things that tend to be things that come out of Kiffin teams, which, sometimes you say to yourself, well, maybe he's looking ahead already to someplace else, which has been talked about. But this is just a must for me, just how the difference in gap is just too much to overcome.
Yeah, Ole Miss doesn't have mystique, I think. I think that's part of the thing is that some teams can win on mystique. They can absolutely kind of, have the ghosts come out, and the Ole Miss just doesn't have that history, right? One of the teams that you would say he might be looking at, but may not even be open if they can close rather strong, is Florida, who does have a bit of mystique in that they've won several national championships, although that's been a very long time ago. They've got Georgia this week. It's a massive spread for Georgia. It's 16.5, I think, when I last checked this morning. But Billy Napier has shored up that defense. They're way better against the run. As a matter of fact, I thought he was going to get fired after the UCF game because that was a terrible matchup. And UCF, the teams are going in opposite directions. And, Billy Napier, I still think he's not the coach next year because it's already kind of out there. But if he can grab this one, and shock the world, then he's probably not gone. Those are those things that are happening. Is this one that maybe could be interesting because that's a 16.5-point spread? This is not a classically dominant Georgia team, although they're very, very good, but Florida's maybe tighten some things up here.
Yeah, I think the story of the entire game is the line. So it was actually 20.5 Wednesday of last week. It was 17 by Sunday, 16 yesterday, and looking at our consensus line, which goes across a bunch of different books, it's now 14.5. So it's pretty much dropped 6 points since the look ahead. And I think that kind of tells to where the value lies. So Florida's lost 12 consecutive games straight up as a double-digit underdog, dating back to 2016. Overall, they are just 3-22 as double-digit dogs straight up since 1990. And they're actually beating Georgia in this spot back in 2014. So I guess there is some sort of precedence. I think the angle to take when handicapping the game, Georgia's obviously on a little bit of extended rest here, coming off the bye after a 5-game ATS losing streak 2 weeks ago. And then under Kirby Smart, 20-3 straight up, 15-8 against the spread on any extended rest. So he's done well preparing for this one. Now the line is a little bit high in those circumstances, but personally, I make the spread 16. I kind of look towards the first half under a little bit. Now, I like 27.5. It's down to 26.5, which gives me a little pause, especially first half. 27 tends to be a key number. So 26.5 gives me a little pause. But listen, neither Florida nor Georgia have found ways to put a point on the board early. In fact, neither team ranks in the top 80 in first quarter scoring. I expect Georgia's defense to show up and really give Florida some trouble. Georgia's pass D is just really, really good, and I think you're going to see a little bit of punting back and forth. Georgia might get some scores on the board. I just don't know how Florida is going to score. So, again, I hate doing this because I'm more of a dog better than I am a favorite better because I do feel like the value tends to sometimes be more on that side. But I just don't. Again, with the Ole Miss game like this, the talent gap is too wide. So I would look first half under. I would look Georgia, but I would like under that 16 number, preferably 14 on the dot would be great. So we'll see what happens there. But I agree. The mystique of Florida is something noteworthy, but I feel like, and they've been terrible there, but it happens more in the swamp than it does anywhere else. So we'll see how they do here.
Yeah, rivalry game, cocktail party, Jacksonville, all that stuff, But yeah, it's not the swamp. A&M, huge win, probably their biggest win in the program since Johnny Manziel beat Alabama, because when Johnny Manziel beat Alabama, they still had a shot at the SEC. The last time they beat Alabama, that was not really in question. It was just upsetting Alabama. Yeah. Here, this one is knocking out, not necessarily knocking out, but setting a team back in that SEC title race that was right there with you with the same conference record. So you get a head-to-head there. But now they go on the road to South Carolina, who's been sneakily tough to beat all year long. A&M is not saying who the quarterback's going to be, but they have two fairly good options there, especially if Marcel Reed, is out there. This could be a trap game, but what does the money say?
Second most tickets of any game on the slate on Saturday right now. So this is a highly contested. A lot of people have interest betting this one. Large action on A&M. If I'm looking at it right now, so it is 87% of the tickets and 92% of the money laying a road team in A&M here. The line is mostly not moved. It's mostly been about 3. Just this morning kind of ticked up to that 3.5. I think that probably tells you what the smart bet is a little bit. So this is, to me, the best situational spot on the board this weekend. Coming off a bye week, South Carolina hosting A&M, having a comeback win off of LSU, and then taking over first sole possession in the SEC. To me, the Gamecocks aren't in contention for an SEC title, but they are 2 plays away from sitting at 4-1 in league play potentially. Wins over Alabama, maybe even LSU instead of a pair of losses by 2 and 3 points. After 7 straight wins, A&M finds itself ranked inside the top 10, but I'm just not sure they belong there. And I will one nugget I'll look at here. Excluding the COVID season, South Carolina 12-5-1 ATS at home against top 10 teams since 2005. They're covering by almost 7 points per game, and that includes 7 outright victories as either an underdog or a small favorite. I'm going to go with the Gamecocks here. I want the 3.5, but I just feel like it's a great situational spot where A&M probably should have dropped a game or 2 leading up to this one, and South Carolina maybe shouldn't be on that type of skid facing all these other teams leading up to it. So Gamecocks, here we go.
Just like we all predicted at the beginning of the year, Pitt and SMU would be playing for a game with actual playoff implications. I mean, the winner of this game is sitting pretty. Now, headed towards a potential 3-way tie in the ACC, given everybody's schedule down the stretch. But this is a huge, huge game. And if you had looked at this on September 1st, just September 1st, you'd have been like, well, by that time, nobody's going to care. 60 days from now, that's going to be a game that we're like, if you're in the bar and you're like, oh, is this Pitt and SMU? All right, whatever. That's what people would have thought about it. But Kevin Jennings playing, Eli Holstein playing. There was some question about that early in the week. Kevin Jennings cleared today. He's going to play. This one, is intriguing to me for the fact that it went from a game no one cared about to a game that the whole ACC is watching right now and wondering how this is going to affect all of them.
Yeah, many people would have probably looked at this game on their side screen and been like, what conference do these guys play in again?
Yeah.
I can't remember. This is a completely fascinating matchup for most of the public. And it's kind of comparable. Anyone who watched Texans Jets last night. So you have the 2-6 Jets against the 6-2 Texans, and the Jets are favored in the game. Kind of similar here. So you've got SMU opening at about 5.5, now up to 7.5, and Pitt's undefeated. So you have an undefeated Pitt team getting over a touchdown, which is off the bat something probably most people would bat an eye to and be like, give me some information to figure out why this is possible. So I'll just give one blanket number here. So undefeated teams in game 8 or later as a 6+ point dog, 7-27 straight up, 14-19-1 against the spread since 2010. Interesting enough, those games 21-13 to the under. So kind of some sort of defensive battles, but it seems to me the number feels about right considering the market tends to be right in this spot. I would be more interested in SMU than I am in Pittsburgh, especially this might sound crazy. We're projecting this at the Action Network closer to SMU -10. Just based off the talent on the field, based off of what we've seen from Pittsburgh. I don't want to call it a luck box, but some of the turnovers over the last few weeks, some of the lucky breaks, they really haven't had to play much close football in certain circumstances. And one on the field note, Pitt's explosiveness on the ground just won't show up to me against SMU, a defense that ranks 12th in opponent rush EPA. I'm going to go SMU, and honestly, with the money that I have on SMU currently, I'm going to hope Pitt comes out a little hot. I'm going to roll more on SMU if that line comes down. So, but again, if you're like a normal guy just enjoying his college football weekend, this is something you got to have on a screen, because just based off the line, and if Pitt can pull off the upset, it's going to make for a very fascinating line for them going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Finally, the game I'll be at just right down the street tomorrow night, Baylor versus TCU. There's a lot of you want to talk about mystique. There's a lot of ghosts that's going to be hanging around this one, particularly because Baylor is honoring their 2013 and 2014 Big 12 championship teams. 3 of those coaches, Kendall Briles, Carlton Buckles, and Kaz Kazadi, coach at TCU now. Gary Patterson spent part of the offseason consulting at Baylor, although he's not there now. All these guys are going to be back. A lot of the coaches are going to be back. Like, it's going to be kind of a weird thing. Baylor never beats TCU. Never beats them in any circumstance. Like, they just don't. Like, that was the last team that had a winning record against them, and they're bringing them back. But both these teams are on the upswing right now, and both have favorable schedules down the stretch and are looking to make some hay while the sun shines, particularly Baylor and Dave Aranda, who might be saving his job. Like, if he beats TCU, he can take a huge sigh of relief. This one is... Look, I'm just telling you, I'm not the betting guy. That's why we have you to teach us these things. But I, as a person who knows both these teams pretty intimately.
Yeah, what do you like?
It took me until yesterday to make my prediction. I picked Baylor because they were playing better right now than TCU.
Sure.
But I am fully ready to be wrong about that.
Yeah, so this isn't exact like Texas A&M and South Carolina was an extremely popular play on the board. Of all the games, I said second most popular in terms of tickets. This game's down the list. But the thing that makes it really interesting is in terms of popular underdogs. So TCU getting about 75% of the tickets as an underdog in this one. So everybody coming in on this game seems to love the dog, and it's a very high percentage for an underdog. Usually you see, in the 60s if you're a popular underdog, but this is getting 70 and plus. So to me, the public has seen TCU win both of their games as road dogs already this year. And they haven't won 3 straight games as road dogs since 2017. So some circumstances there. And as you mentioned, TCU has had historical success versus Baylor. They're 12-4 straight up and 12-4 against the number against them since 2006. And that is consistent, as you've mentioned. Again, and even when sometimes they find a way to lose, usually it ain't 2 in a row against this team. So in my opinion, if you're going to play TCU, which it does feel like most people are, I would kind of look at the team total. Here, 28, 35, 43, 34, and 38. Oh, that's Baylor's points allowed last 5 games. I just feel like if TCU is going to do what most of these bettors feel like they're going to do, they're also going to put up points. So first half team total, full game team total. It's something I would look at versus trying to get involved with what I would assume be a very hectic kind of game where a lot of different things can happen on the field with two teams who aren't exactly fantastic. So I'm going to root for some points on the road side here.
All right. Yeah, I can promise you the atmosphere will go from like super excited and pumped to as tense and clinched as you can be. It will, like, I'll tell you, I'm here for all of it. I cannot wait. I'm actually sitting in the stands for this one, which I don't normally do, but a friend has invited me. So I want to, because I want to feel the chaos and anxiety. I have no dog in the hunt other than, we're right here by Baylor. Would love to see them win. Me and my wife will be the only two people in the stadium here going, huh? What about that?
Listen, the total, I'll say this, the total has ticked up a little bit, 61.5 to 64. So I do feel like defense might be optional here. So that's the reason I got to do it. I got to assume this might be a 40-37 weird one that Baylor might win. It might look great, but I just don't see their defense being able to stop anything.
Yeah, no, I don't think defense is going to be, just there. Like you have to have 11 other guys on the field. That's for either team. Like you're required to do it, so it'll be there, and we'll see what happens. Evan Abrams, Action Network HQ. Go follow him. Go read his stuff. NFL stuff this week is particularly intriguing, especially when it comes to because this is midpoint of the season-ish, and so we've got kind of the up and down going where you can kind of see where teams are going. And so absolutely go check out Evan on Action Network HQ. This is 365 Sports.